Okay, so welcome to the Consultation. My name is Josh Floyd. We have Christina Jimenez, but more importantly, Brandon Borchardt here with us. Christina and I are attorneys here in the state of Texas, practicing family law. Brandon is a client of ours, and he wanted to join us today to talk about his experience. And today we're going to talk about jury trial.
Well, jury trial, and then just kind of, the difficulties in dealing with a custody/divorce dispute, the difficulties in litigation, just kind of all of that stuff, because it's a lot. And I always tell people all the time that I wouldn't wish this process on my worst enemy. Would you agree with that?
It's a true statement.
It's a true statement. And no matter how good your attorney is, no matter
his attorney was really good. It was really good.
Right. No matter how empathetic they are, no matter how much we try to simplify the process, it's tough. It's really, really tough. And so, let's start off with this. If I remember correctly, we were actually the second firm or the second set of lawyers that you had retained. Is that correct?
That is correct. I hired an attorney prior to you, and that attorney unfortunately made some decisions that you had an uphill battle from the start. Mm-hmm. I hired that lawyer. We had a temporary hearing. Prior to that hearing, he said he can't litigate over a Zoom phone call, that I need to agree to all their demands, and then when we get to a hearing or a trial, that's when the litigation can happen, and that's when he was going to get my kids back. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. We had that hearing. I agreed to the kids moving back to Colorado, and that wasn't my true wishes there. So unfortunately, hired a bad attorney, I guess.
Well, so let me ask you this. Did you vet him? Did you research him before you hired him? Or how did you, come about finding him?
So I contacted probably 100 lawyers.
Oh, goodness.
That's a lot of attorneys.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was during COVID. A lot of divorces going on. A lot of lawyers told me their caseload was full. They had too many clients. Some of the best attorneys told me she'd already contacted them, that I couldn't hire them because they'd already...
Well, that's not true, because she didn't contact us.
That's right.
Right. Okay, so some of the second best attorneys.
Right.
Okay.
Well, however she missed you guys, they got you.
Right? So a lot of them were conflicted out, and a lot of them were not available, and so... Then did you just happen to, he was just one of the calls that you made and he was available?
So after a lot of frustration, I just started going through the phone book again, going through Google, and just started the whole process. I want to say I spent about almost a week straight until I contacted, I believe it was Rudy at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was so glad to finally have a competent lawyer. Mm-hmm. I think he left your firm shortly after that, and then I started communicating with Mr. Floyd, and the difference was night and day. So really put time and effort into, like you said, vetting. I didn't know what to look at in a lawyer, but the super lawyers, a lot of the certifications and accolades you guys have is things you look for.
Right. And so that is something that I will say that I notice a whole lot when, because, fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, we get hired as second, third, fourth, sometimes fifth attorneys in these types of cases. And I will ask people well, how did you find your first attorney? And they'll say, oh, well, my buddy told them, or I had a hearing coming up and I had to scramble. And so I just basically hired the first one that was available. And there's not a whole lot of research that's going into the attorneys that they're hiring. And so that's what I would encourage. And I've had family members who call me and they're, in another state or they're in another city and I can't help them. And so I immediately go to Google. I do exactly what you just talked about. I look at the Google reviews. I look at the AVO reviews. I look at super lawyers. I, look for certification, board certifications. And more importantly, I'll sit in on the consultations and kind of talk to them, and I'll get a vibe for, do I think this is going to be a good fit for my family member? Because just because an attorney has all of those things, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the attorney for you, right? Like, y'all have to kind of link up and determine, are we going to be on the same page when we're going through this?
Yeah, I mean, particularly in cases like this, which I didn't think we say, but his was a divorce with a couple kids, right? Just kind of a general overview. We're not going to get heavy into the details, but it was a divorce, a couple of young kids. And so when you're dealing with really sensitive issues like that, you've got to make sure that you can communicate effectively with the attorney that you hire and that you can trust that attorney, most importantly, right? To make decisions that are not only in the best interest of you, but of your children. I mean, that's what you're hiring for, right? And it's a very, very important decision. Probably one of the most important decisions you'll make is which attorney you hire to protect your kids.
Right, right. And so yours was a little bit unique because you had to deal with one of our associate attorneys at the time, but obviously he had kind of the same value systems and the same information that we would normally give you. And so you do the consultation. I guess you felt comfortable with the team, and then that's when we kind of had to start telling you, like, hey, we're concerned with where you are right now.
Definitely. One of the things I noticed is you looked at the big picture. You had a plan for the entire course of the trial or the case. My previous lawyer, he said the temporary hearing wasn't a big deal, and it's like it absolutely was a big deal. So don't let a lawyer tell you.
Good job. We say that all the time on this podcast.
It sets everything in place, and it's really hard to make any changes after that. Come to find out, we spent the next 3 years trying to make small changes, and it seemed impossible.
Right. Right. Yeah, and so a lot of attorneys, and I'd say a lot of young attorneys, or maybe just attorneys that don't do a whole lot of family law, they definitely treat temporary orders like they don't matter. You don't really have to prepare for them. You don't need to, have exhibits. You don't need to have witnesses. You don't need to subpoena people. They kind of blow them off, and I always think that that's just such a rookie mistake because, like you said, it sets the course for the entire case, right? Most often, what happens at a temporary hearing is likely going to be the result at a final trial unless something major happens between that temporary hearing and the final trial. Because judges don't really like to change things, especially when we're dealing with custody cases. And so, yeah, that was unfortunate. But to be fair, like, COVID was a wacky time. We were all trying to figure it out. Zoom hearings, a lot of attorneys were not comfortable with Zoom hearings. And so I think there probably were a lot of mistakes that were made during that time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the tricky part about temporary is, like I say, is you got to try it like a final. But at final, you could have 2 days. At temporary, you have 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, sometimes
right?
20 minutes.
Yeah, depending on the county.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
And so it is real limited on what you can get in, but that doesn't mean that it's less important than a final hearing. It absolutely sets the stage, like it did in your case, right? I mean, it impacted your ability to see the kids and all that stuff, right?
Well, and the other thing is pursuant to the rules of civil procedure, you're only entitled to 3 days notice of a temporary hearing, right? Now, I would say 9 times out of 10, if you get served, 4 days prior to the trial and you go in and you ask for a continuance, the judge is going to give it to that attorney or even to that party and say, okay, you need time, right? But even then, you're probably looking at 2 weeks to a month to get, all this evidence gathered and to prep your case. And that's probably one of the most difficult things that we've had to do or learn to do. I had a custody case one time where I had 6 witnesses, police officers, psychiatrists, investigators, and my client, and I had 30 minutes to put all of those witnesses on. And when those witnesses walk in, the judge looks at me like, you are batshit crazy. You're never going to get through all of this.
I can confirm the judge's belief.
And I was like, Judge, just have a little faith in me. And it was literally 2 minutes, a witness, go, boom. I have my 4 questions. I got in what I needed to go. Next witness. But to get to that point, it probably took me like 5 or 6 hours to condense all of that information to be able to present it in 30 minutes. And it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
But it's important. Very,
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah. And so you guys actually went in on a motion to modify the temporary orders.
How many times did we do that?
3 times.
3 times to try to modify.
Yeah.
It didn't go good.
Right. And so, I guess talk about that and kind of because a lot of times I'll have clients that will come to me and they have had, bad experiences with other lawyers, and they basically are frustrated with the process. They're losing hope. Why did you continue to fight despite, us continuously hitting roadblocks?
So from the beginning, you guys were honest with me that it wasn't likely to get the outcome I wanted. Throughout the whole process, she seemed to have issues following the orders. We had a lot of violations, a lot of denial of visitation, and it just seems like she wasn't held accountable for a lot of her actions through the process. But realizing it is a process that eventually things will be done. It's just not going to happen overnight. It's going to take numerous hearings, and I want to say with 3 modifications, we had three or 4 temporary hearings.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a long process. There's a lot that went into it, and realizing that all of it is very important. A lot of the small details that I maybe didn't understand at the time, even some of the costs, like printing. You're always hit with like $16 for printing at least. Even hundreds of dollars for printing sometimes, but I didn't realize it until I was in the courtroom and I see a dolly of paperwork come in the courtroom. We have 3 huge notebooks, all organized with all the information, and something opposing counsel didn't have. They were actually using your resources to try to present their case. And that was definitely one of the things I noticed there.
Yeah, shout out to Brittany and Mike there for prepping those binders. We need you. We love you.
For sure. So you, I guess, were understandably, tainted. You had a bad outlook on attorneys when you hired us, right?
Yeah.
And we got into it a couple times. We had some pretty tough conversations. You were frustrated with the process, right?
Definitely a lot of frustration.
And I kept telling you, trust in the system. We're going that direction, right? So kind of talk about that feeling and how you kind of learned to forget about the crappy attorneys and trust the good ones.
Like you said, I had trust issues, right? And I probably seemed difficult to work with and talk to. And
Definitely, yeah, there were times.
But you didn't give up on me. And, it was before one of our modification hearings. We just had kind of a side conversation waiting for the judge, and you simply said, "I got you." And I don't know what it was, but it just clicked in my head, like, this man is really in my best interest. And
don't. Gosh.
He does
You gotta
have
ruin
a
my
heart.
reputation.
yeah, no, I'm an emotional person, and Floyd isn't, and I learned
He
that.
is. He just doesn't show it. Yeah, so but he is for sure.
That's right, because there's a lot of emotional times throughout this whole process, and even once the verdict was read, everybody wants to hug and celebrate. And
Floyd was like, "Don't touch me."
No, he grabbed me. He grabbed me.
It was
He's
kind of
way
one-sided
bigger than he's
hug.
like, "Get it right here." But yeah, so he said, "I got you," and then you just kind of.
It just clicked for me. I started listening and following his direction to the T, and immediately started seeing results. And a lot of that was just don't react to what they're doing. Leave emotion out of it. Kind of like less is more. The less you do, the more. Don't be posting on social media. Don't
Facts.
Yeah. Don't respond to nasty text messages. Just document it. And just, I guess. I don't know where I'm going with that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And so that is a very, very important kind of lesson that we try to teach our clients along the way is if you do what we tell you to do, then you will more than likely see results. Obviously, we can never guarantee results because so much of of the outcome depends on the other side too, right? So if the other side is doing everything correctly and they're co-parenting and they're allowing visitation and they're communicating and they're doing all these great things, then maybe the outcome would have been different, right? But 9 times out of 10, if we're telling you to do certain things, it's because we know that these are the things that the judges look for and that are going to result in a favorable outcome. But so many of our clients don't do that, right? And I think it's because, like you said, the emotion gets the best of them and they want to be reactive, and then it ends up impacting the outcome of their case.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I tell people a lot, like, if you listen to me, if you do what I tell you to do, then we're going to win this. But if you start going rogue on me, I don't, it's tough. It's tough to win. So, and so I appreciate you for listening to him and actually following through, because a lot of people don't do that. Yeah.
And they don't get
Imagine
the
makes your
outcome.
job real difficult.
Well, and it's hard on you, because at the end of the day, you're the one that has to live with these results, and sometimes if they're not favorable, it's just really unfortunate.
Well, I was lucky enough to finally take his direction to heart and form that trust, and we started to see results. And a lot of it, like the mediation and discovery, and like I said, a lot of stuff doesn't make sense until you're in the courtroom, and all the what seems like insignificant questions, she answered incorrectly, and that was used against her in the trial. Another thing, just don't lie. Don't lie ever. No matter how bad it is, you just tell your lawyer the truth.
Absolutely.
And speak the truth in the courtroom, because I got to witness firsthand how miserable it can be when you lie.
Not because you
They're
did it,
gonna
but because
find-
the other side
Yeah.
did it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. But the way that I try to explain it to my clients, because it does happen, right? Because like you said, you had a hearing and no results. You had another hearing and then no results on another hearing. And there was not favorable results or not what you wanted. Then you go to mediation and you have all of this work that you're doing, and it's your money coming out of pocket. And it's like, what is this all for? So I try to equate it to like building a home, right? Like, you got to go in there, you got to lay the foundation, you got to lay the plumbing, and there's electrical, and there's all this crap that you're seeing that has to be done in order to build this big, beautiful home. But you don't necessarily see the end result along the way. But you need all of that crap in order to be able to open that door and turn that key and have this beautiful house that you're living in, right? So many people don't understand that process. And so why is it that you just kept keeping the faith and believing that this was going to work?
A lot of it was I wasn't left a choice through alienation and some of the things that were happening. It was either continue or you don't see your kids. Mm-hmm. I went, I think, at first 120 days until I was allowed to see my children. And then that first visit involved me giving her a paid off vehicle. And I think I was allowed 20 or 30 minutes of visitation in the front yard. And that was just heartbreaking. I was grateful that I finally got to see my children. Mm-hmm. But even after that, the alienation it didn't seem there was any end in sight to it. Mm-hmm. Once I hired the Jimenez Law Firm, you guys immediately.
We're Jimenez Floyd now.
Jimenez Floyd.
I had to make him a damn partner.
Dang it.
Exactly.
Best move she ever made, huh?
Whatever. And so Jimenez Floyd, yes, once you hired us.
He did accomplish, I think, what was impossible, right?
Right,
I don't
right.
know how often you're presented with that situation, but it felt like one in a million to me. So,
yeah.
And you get to experience coming home to my children every day and to be a dad where I wasn't even allowed one visit a month prior.
Right.
So that 1 week in a month seems like such a small amount, and then you're still denied that. It's just so painful to go through that.
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you, and we did tell you throughout your case, listen, we're gonna fight like hell for you, but We don't know. And just to kind of give a little bit of I guess, a breakdown. So mom had moved, we should have done this in the beginning, but mom had moved to Colorado because of the agreement at temporary orders. Dad was given visitation. And our position was, and I know mom would probably have a different story, but our position was that mom was not allowing the access. And so we were trying to get mom back from Colorado, and that was like the whole, all those motions to modify that he's talking about. We're trying to get mom back, most judges aren't going to do that on a temporary hearing because they don't know what's going to happen at the final trial, right? And so throughout the process, we're explaining to Brandon, like, hey, don't think it's going to happen, don't think it's going to happen. But, he was frustrated with not seeing his kiddos, and we had to do something, right? And so even at the final trial, and we eventually decide to do a jury trial, which jury trials are pretty rare in family law cases. But at this particular point, we were going to basically do everything that we could to try to get these kiddos back to Texas. And even going into that, we had, I think, prepped you mentally, like, listen, don't be upset or don't be surprised if we don't win this. And I think at most what Floyd and I were hoping for was that mom would maintain primary custody but have to move back to Texas. That was like, if we can get that, that's a win. And then what ended up happening was dad got primary, and mom ended up getting visitation. And so that was pretty amazing and pretty spectacular, I think.
I cried. A little bit. Hearing the judge read the verdict.
Right.
I wasn't able to continue standing. Had to sit down for a minute and gather myself, and the tears just started coming down.
Oh my God.
I went into that. You were honest with the likely outcomes of that trial, and I went in there just hoping. I think she had me on the stand for 8 hours, 5 hours the first day, and 3 hours the next day, and it just got real repetitive. And just some of the things they did just seemed to lose the jury from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
They had some recordings. I had spoken poorly, and she had some recordings. There was some swearing and stuff, and just they weren't a representation of who I was. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like the focal point of their trial, their case was these 4 or 5 recordings. And Josh, I guess, broke these recordings down, put them into perspective, and they really weren't that bad after that, I guess. Like, they weren't great, but once you realize, like, 3 of the recordings were one conversation. She swore first in most of the recordings, and it seemed like she was just kind of egging me on, trying to get a reaction. And just some of the things Floyd pointed out, some of the small details, just the entire process. He always caught all these little details that just blew her whole story.
Well, so I don't know if you remember, and you may not have been privy to this information. I think you were, because y'all were at Starbucks. And shout out to Julie for this one. So,
Well, do you remember that? The morning of trial, sitting at Starbucks?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
5 in the morning.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. Like, okay. But that's what we have to do sometimes. But so I remember y'all were there with one of our associate attorneys, Julie, and Floyd called me that morning, and he's like, so Julie just had an idea, and I want to run it by you. And I was like, okay. And he says, what if we put these recordings out there first, in our case in chief, because we were the petitioner, right? I think we were the petitioner.
Yep.
And at first I was like, absolutely not. And then we kind of started talking about it, and then I was like, actually, I think it's kind of brilliant.
Risky.
It was very risky, but I think it was the right strategic decision.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure now.
Yeah. Do you remember how you were feeling that morning, Mr. Floyd?
Oh, confident. Good.
Right.
Nervous as hell. I mean, what was our prep? How much do we prep for this trial? What was that like, going through the trial prep?
Wait, why are you diverting?
Because I want to ask you questions.
No, we got to talk about this because so I've been doing it for 16 years. You've been doing it for 13 years, right? And almost every single hearing, even temporary orders hearings, I still like get nervous, like butterflies in my stomach, like we're calling each other, like, what do you think about this and how are we going to deal with this? And I remember that morning
Yeah, it
you
was a
called
mess.
me and you were like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, you have nothing to lose. Like you have nothing to lose, because where it is right now, it's not going to get any worse than that. And so go in there, do what you do, have a little fun with it, and see what happens. If we get our geo, that's a win. Sorry. That's a win. And so he was like, okay. And then
Yeah, it's just like you never feel prepared enough, right? You always feel like I should have done this. Did I miss something? What am I missing here? What else could I have done? Because we're all talking about people's kids, right? And whether or not he had a relationship with his kids or we're not, right? So it's very serious. But yeah, that's every hearing, but particularly jury trials, right? Because now you're presenting in front of 12 strangers that you're putting on a show, basically, right? I mean, a performance kind of. So it's different than a bench trial, but yeah, just feel nervous. Like, what did I miss? Where's this gonna go? What the hell's gonna happen? Did I screw this up?
But
Right.
when you get into the courtroom and you actually say your first word, does it
Once
all...
it starts, I'm just in there. Boom.
I'm
Just
like, it all just
in the
like
mode.
goes away, and I'm like, okay, we got this. Like, let's go. But it's that 1 hour or so leading up to it, or even like the days leading up to
Right.
it. I'm just like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna do this? And so, did you know that he was
I
nervous?
did. So that
Okay.
morning, it just seemed like unorganized, and he had a bunch of different ideas. But then once we were in the courtroom, it was just like concrete, like he was on a mission.
Yeah.
And where I was on the stand, I think 8 hours or whatever. She was on the stand like 45 minutes, and it was just absolutely painful to watch. So I'm so glad I didn't have to go against a like attorney.
Right.
Uh,
Well, and I'll say that, so going back to kind of the whole Julie thing, so we sometimes will have to make these last minute changes in our strategy, but again, that's where
sometimes mid-trial.
Like something happens and we're like, oh crap, maybe we need to shift gears here. But that's again, you kind of trusting us and saying like, hey, if you think that this is what we need to do, let's roll. Yeah. So you were going to ask him something before I rudely interrupted
The
you.
trial prep. How was it going through? Well, first of all, making the decision to go to trial, to a jury trial versus a bench trial.
So I think the decision was made for me that just going off the previous process, that she just refused to follow the orders and allow visitation, that she just kind of left no choice, that we have to go to trial, and win or lose. Well, especially lose. I just feel like I never would have seen my children. That even to this day, she still would have kept doing what she was doing, right? And being put through that personally, like I'm not going to make those same mistakes she made. I'm not going to alienate her at any point. I'm going to follow the orders to the T. And that's another thing. Just follow the orders. Like don't deviate from them at all. Just follow the orders.
So the prep. What was the prep like?
So the prep, the night before, I believe we had about a 2-3 hour phone call where you were kind of preparing me for cross-examination, some of the questions and tactics and stuff I'd probably face in the courtroom. And having no previous experience in a courtroom, I didn't really know what was coming. And you guys had your way with me, right? You had me agreeing and saying things that were absolutely not
and
true.
then we're yelling at you like, why would you say that?
Knowing your tactics and the preparation was actually absolutely critical because then when I was on this stand, you just find a pace, you're calm, you think about the question being asked, and don't be afraid to have them explain it further or ask it in a different way. And it just kind of ruined their whole pace, I guess, because they try to get you just saying yes, 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 or no, 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 and just really thinking about how the questions are asked, and just taking your time and thinking, and just that preparation really paid off in the courtroom, I feel like.
Did you think that our prep was more difficult than the actual cross-examination in the courtroom?
Absolutely.
I hear
Yeah,
that all the time.
I know they're like, that was easy compared to what y'all did.
Yeah, no, I think it was Julie and Josh. They were both cross-examining me, and it's just, oh my goodness, if it's how tomorrow's going to be, I am not getting custody of my kids, right? And luckily, her attorney wasn't on that level of litigation, I guess.
Well, but to that attorney's, I guess, credit, it happens to us. It's happened to me where I go in with a plan of how I'm going to present a case. And then, essentially what Floyd did by making that, strategic decision with these recordings is he took the wind out of her sails, right? And so he basically gutted her entire case in chief that she had probably prepped, for weeks for. That's what she was going to do. And perhaps she should have mid-trial, like we talked about, changed her strategy and said, okay, I don't know that going through these recordings again is going to be beneficial. But I mean, sometimes if that's all that you have, that's all that you have, right? And so I don't know if I had been on the other end what I would have done, but it was definitely, I think you, just by litigation and all of your experience in the courtroom, put her in a difficult spot. So
Definitely. So these recordings, I want to say, were about 20 minutes long, all of them together. We played them. We got to tell our story and some of the background to what led up to those recordings, and it really diffused their whole strategy. Like you said, she didn't change direction and stayed with the recordings. She then played them, I believe, 2 or 3 more times. And I believe the last time she announced she was going to play it, I hear one of the jurors say, "Jesus Christ!"
Oh,
like they're
no.
just bored of listening to these recordings. Like,
No.
there's some terrible things in them, but listening to them for an hour and a half straight, I don't think they deemed that amount of attention. But that was the focal point of their defense, I guess.
Right.
Strategy.
So were you as scared as I was after jury selection?
It's another crazy process where you don't realize like where the money goes, I guess. But after seeing the amount of effort their jury selection and our jury selection, where you have Josh, Julie, and Greta. Greta's on a computer, and Lord knows what she's doing, but she's got like 5 programs opening, and she's
Probably
researching.
watching TV shows or something.
That's right. But it's quite the process where I want to say you have about 1 minute to interview or talk to a juror, or 15 minutes total, but it's a small amount of time to talk to 50 some jurors, right? So you had a good idea of what questions you're going to ask. And I think one of the questions was like, regardless of any of the evidence, do you feel like mom or dad would be a better choice? And I want to say like 40 jurors said no matter what, mom's a better choice. It's like,
I know.
oh man, this isn't going to go good for us, right? Like that was absolutely just defeating.
Right.
Like, no matter what, mom's better regardless of any of the evidence.
Yeah.
40 some jurors are standing. It's like, oh my
I
goodness.
felt like we were shot in the head too. I was like, oh god.
Yeah.
Floyd called
So,
me after that. He's like, "We're so screwed," and I was like, "It's okay. You're gonna be all right." But yeah, and I mean, so that's something that I think is important for viewers to hear or to see. Viewers see and listeners hear. Yes.
Most
okay.
times, but our viewers are also listeners.
Okay, very good. There's and maybe we've kind of gone away from this, but I know when I first started practice many moons ago, fathers had this idea that in the state of Texas, you cannot win custody. Like mothers always win custody, dads always get visitation, dad always pays child support. And I can't tell you even now where I'll have a consultation come in and they say, oh, well, I've interviewed all these other lawyers and they basically said, I'm dad, I'm just going to get visitation. And so I think it's important for people to understand that that's not the case. And in fact, in the Texas Family Code, it's prohibited to factor in sex when determining, who should have conservatorship over the kiddo. But I mean, you're a father and your kiddos were young or are young, right? And you were able to win primary custody of them.
How old were they at trial?
Off the top of my head, 3 and 5, and the process prior to that was about 2.5, 3 years. So for the majority of these kids' lives, I haven't been allowed to be there, be a dad. And that was a big focal point of our case, is that families are better together, and being a dad, and I wouldn't be able to do that from a distance. We made numerous offers to even move to Colorado in mediation, and she absolutely refused. It was just like her whole purpose and her whole point was just to alienate me, right? And I think the jurors definitely were made aware of that through Floyd's litigation.
How many days were you in trial? 2 or 3?
3 days.
3 days of trial?
Yeah. And it takes a toll on you. Like, I don't know how you guys do this for a living, but those 3 days I lost 15 pounds.
Oh
I
my
wasn't able to eat. And you go on like no sleep where Floyd's communicating me through the night, information he needs and things he required and what he's thinking and what we're going to do the next day. And it's like, when do you sleep?
Yeah.
So I can't imagine like trial week for you guys, how many trials you have a year, but it takes a toll on your body.
It does. It's mentally and physically exhausting, and just the stress associated with it, because I hope I never lose that, and that is the amount of care that I have for my clients and for their outcomes, because I think that's what drives me to work, at midnight, at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, like just constantly won't shut off. It's because we care about you guys, we care about your kiddos, we care about the results, and we care about our performance. But it's hard, it's stressful.
The effort's there.
Yeah.
So during trial prep and during trial, my wife won't let me stay at home anymore. She's like, you go get a room. You're not going to let me sleep. So go somewhere else.
Oh, that's so funny. So, I mean, all in all, I guess any other recommendations or tips for people that are going to have to go through, a contested process?
I don't think it's a common thing you go to the extent I do. I mean, usually you probably settle or reach an agreement, right? But I was unfortunate to go this distance, and I was so fortunate to hire the Jimenez Law Firm and represented me the way they did, and the outcome is just, I mean, my kids' lives, my life, and I can't, from the bottom of my heart, I can't thank you both enough for the effort and what you did.
Yeah,
It's just
absolutely. Well, and thank you again for choosing us, for trusting us, because I think there's so many times along the way you could have just given up hope, and you could have just said, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, and ultimately the credit goes to you, right? Because your dad, you're the one who chose to continue to fight and to not give up on your kiddos, and so thank you for being a good dad. Absolutely. So, with that being said, thank you guys for watching the consultation. As always, this is not legal advice, and so if you find yourself in a similar situation, please reach out to local counsel. Make sure you retain them. Make sure you listen to them. Make sure you don't lie. Trust the process. And follow us on all social media. We have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have YouTube. If there's a platform, we are likely on it. So, thank y'all.